Since late January, we were talking of the monetary policy statement, expectations if we are to be exact, and today we get to discuss more on that issue. Hello and welcome. This is World of Business, your weekly cutting-edge business show where we get to delve deeper into the trending business issues. My name is Malvin Mutana. And today on this issue, we are going to be unpacking all these issues. And we have economic analyst, Mr. Tapiwa Mutana. He is an economic analyst as well as a banker. Sir, welcome to World of Business.
Hello, Marvin. Thank you for having me.
So now this is a very topical issue. And we have to make sure that everyone at home gets to understand what is going on. To delve deeper now into this conversation, last week, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor Dr. John Mushayavanhu presented the 2024 monetary policy statement. A lot of us were waiting for this presentation. Now, one of the major issues was to achieve a solid and stable currency. Give us from your own perspective, the key takeaways from this statement.
Okay. So I can confirm that this was a much anticipated monetary policy compared to other monetary policies which have been released in the past. To add to the anticipation, the president made an announcement that a structured currency is on its way. So people were curious to see and to know what the structured currency is going to bear. So the monetary policy statement was released last week, where the governor alluded to the fact that we need a national currency, a strong national currency, as a cornerstone of economic development, right? That's when the issue of the ZiG came in, when the Zimbabwe Gold, the new currency which is replacing the Zim dollar, is coming in, right? So I took away the issue of a strong national currency, the issue of exchange rate stability, where we are saying the exchange rate is going to be market determined going on. Because this is a backed currency, a structured currency which is backed by gold and a basket of precious minerals and foreign exchange. So this structured currency is now different from a mere fiat currency where the government would just determine through the central bank the actual rate of the ZiG or the ZWL as to US dollars. So this is now a structured currency which will be determined by the market forces. And I've also taken away the issue of restoring confidence, right? Even the theme itself was back to basics, recalibrating the monetary policy framework to anchor price, currency, and exchange rate stability. So I took away the issue of confidence, restoration of confidence, because we saw the governor opening the doors to the public and to the president, of course the public through the media. We actually saw the gold is there to back the currency. So that speaks to the strides of restoration of confidence, to say we are walking the talk, our currency is backed by actual reserves.
Okay,
right.
So now it's a good thing that you have noted quite a number of things. Let's now start looking at those things one by one. Let's start with the structured currency, which you say is backed by the reserves and royalties. The governor also said that when he presented the monetary policy statement. Care to explain further on what this implies about the currency at hand and the effects that it is going to have on the economy?
Okay, so when we're talking about royalties, there are mining royalties which are paid by mining companies to the government for mining within Zimbabwe. So sometime in 2022, the government said the royalties are now to be paid 50% in kind, that is to say, in the form of the mineral being extracted, and the other 50% will be paid in the form of currencies. That was the Zim dollar and the USD 4010 in favor of the Zim dollar. So that 50% which is accrued in the form of minerals, hard minerals, is what we are calling the royalties, which is the gold that we saw, right? So when we are saying it is a structured currency, it is anchored, sort of like a derivative. It is anchored on the basket of the gold, the precious minerals, and the foreign currency, right? It extracts its value. The value is hard-coded into the value of gold. So the effect of this is that I've already introduced the issue of a fiat currency whose value is just thumbsucked, is determined by the government.
So is this currency that other countries have? What is the difference now? We have the structured currency,
Yes.
which we are claiming as Zimbabweans.
Yes.
What is the difference now from our currency and those of other countries that are surrounding us?
Okay, so I might say we were a bit behind in terms of accruing our actual reserves to back our currency. So right now we are now taking the step in the right direction to have our currency backed by gold as it ought to be. But I can state out some differences between this one and the previous currency, the outgoing ZWL. This currency is actually backed by real gold, whereas that one was not backed by gold. When it started as backed by USD, but as time progressed, we saw printing of more money, and it was no longer backed by anything, by actual assets behind it. So that made it a fiat currency because the value was just being determined by the authorities.
Okay,
Right.
so now let's talk about the reserves. We talked about, you said, and we also saw it through the media, that
Yes.
the president, that's Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa, went to the RBZ, saw the gold reserves.
Yes.
And we saw the gold and made sure that our currency is backed by the gold, which we saw through the media. And what is the significance of this move, especially looking at currency formation and managing of money supply?
All right. The number one benefit that I'm going to point out is the issue of confidence. We now know it is there, we have seen it, and it will go a long way. But for it to maintain its stability, the government, through the central bank, also has to walk the talk what the central bank governor, the incoming governor, Dr. John Mushayavanhu, said, that not under my watch, we are not going to print more than what we have. So printing more than the actual reserves themselves will be detriment to the economy. We have seen it happening during the bond note era, when the bond notes were printed more than the Afrexim facility, which was backing the bond notes themselves. So if they manage to walk the talk and keep an optimum supply of cash in the economy, the effects will be far-reaching, and I'm talking about positive effects. However, on the other side, you know, confidence, we can admit that confidence is not at its best right now in the economy. Confidence is very low. We have people who are skeptical. Most of the people, the general public, some of them are skeptical about what this will bring. And we have no one to blame, but we have to introspect and see what caused the lack of confidence. But I would just urge the public to just give it a shot, because this one is actually backed by real assets. And they actually came out in the open to say we have 2.5 tons of gold, which is worth approximately around $187 million there, and around $100 million in foreign currency to back this currency. So if we maintain a tight monetary policy and be disciplined in terms of printing this cash, I see success.
Okay, so now let's talk about these numbers. You have talked about the 2.5 tons of gold.
Yes.
It might seem like a lot, but when we did our research, it seems that South Africa has 125.41 tons of gold that is backing their currency. Now, on the streets of Harare right now, people might be thinking 2.5 tons might seem a bit too low to back a very stable currency. What would you like to say to those?
Yes, I would like to say this currency is not operating in isolation in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is peculiar. It's different from South Africa because we have the multi-currency regime. We are also continuing with the US dollar, with the rand and other currencies up until 2030. So this local currency is only a portion of the actual cash in circulation. End of 2023, we were sitting at 20%. So if we are to just convert that dollar for dollar, we are looking at around 20% of the actual cash in circulation. So that 20% has to perform. If indeed there is a tight monetary policy stance to say we are not going to print more than we have, it will flourish. The challenge will arise when there is now more printing than the actual cash itself. So if there is transparency, The governor has told us that there is 2.5 tons. And that's good enough, as long as there is transparency and honesty and the things tally, the cash and the reserves. We will be good.
Okay, so now let's move on to something which we see already happening now. That is the conversion of our RTGS, the ZW, to a ZIG.
Yes.
Now, that was one of the major key takeaways from this monetary policy statement that we're discussing of today. Now, the reactions on the market have been mixed, with some thinking that it could be the old order. Now, we have seen the transition from this currency to that currency right here in Zimbabwe. If we were to talk about it, in 2009, government introduced a multi-currency regime. In 2019, it outlawed the multi-currency regime and reintroduced the Zim dollar as a legal tender. And we see this happening. And people might think this is a cycle. We're just repeating the same thing. What now is the confidence note that we have to put in public to make sure that they do know that we're not repeating the same cycle over and over again?
Yeah. You know, as I've already iterated, this lack of confidence, we just have to introspect and see where we went wrong. And it's not the fault of the public, but there were some policies which were not correctly implemented. And we wouldn't blame the public for that lack of trust, because we have seen this happen before. We have gone through multiple phases of economic reforms, currency reforms. And I would say when we say this is the same currency, it might be coming from an uninformed perspective, because this is not just a slashing of zeros or a change of name of the currency, because we have seen new things happening, new measures being introduced. For example, the gold, we've seen it. For example, confidence. There is we are now entering an era of transparency. We have seen a new governor who's coming in, who's saying, not on my watch, this is not going to happen. But overall, I would understand, because we can even take some lessons on the way in this currency was introduced. We are talking about the 5th of April, when the monetary policy was announced, and up to now, we still haven't seen the ZIG. And what's happening on the market? How are people transacting? We've seen some retailers shunning away the outgoing ZWL, and we have seen people being overcharged because there is no that divisibility in USD in terms of change.
Okay,
right.
So you know what? We are going to be discussing more on that in the second segment of your World of Business. We are discussing with banker and economic analyst Tapiwa Mutana on the monetary policy statement. We'll be discussing more on this issue in the second segment of your World of Business. We were talking to economic analyst and banker Tapiwa Mutana. Now, we also have to have more information on this. So we are going to be talking to Persistence Gwanyanya. He was and is still a monetary policy committee member, and is going to help us unpack more on this issue. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the second segment of your special edition of this week's World of Business, where we are discussing the country's new medium of exchange, the Zimbabwe Gold, but you know it as the ZIG, which was announced during the presentation of the monetary policy statement by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushayavanhu. Now, in the first segment, we were discussing with economic analyst and banker Tapiwa Mutana, but now, in the second segment, we told you that we need more information on this. So we have Mr. Persistence Gwanyanya, a member of the Monetary Policy Committee. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the program.
So I'll start with you, Mr. Gwanyanya. The Monetary Policy Statement, which we have been discussing, also clarified that the multi-currency system was to stay until 2030 as per the law. Now, are we not going to run risk of our own local currency being inferior and losing value to other currencies?
We think that the multiple currency system is necessary to nurse confidence. You know, where we're coming from as an economy has resulted in the low levels of confidence, our experiences of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So you also need to respect the people, to have empathy about what the people have gone through, and this process has been done, and the multiple currency system was installed by law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we are trying to do is to then strengthen your own currency as you try to then lean towards that currency over time. Admittedly, the multiple currency system is not the best, but under the circumstances where you want to nurse confidence,
Mm-hmm.
considerations had to be made on what pushes the country forward.
Okay.
So the multiple currency system has been seen as the best currency regime at the moment. But you'll find out that the might of the dollar
Mm-hmm.
is unquestionable, but that's why the interventions of the monetary policy is to back our currency with foreign reserves.
Mm-hmm.
That is foreign currency and precious minerals.
Okay, a way to instill confidence in business and also the public. Now, we were discussing this with Tapiwa earlier on, and he gave his thoughts on how we can do this. How do you think now that we can instill confidence on our currency in the business and on the public?
So, confidence is a function of functionality and success of a currency. As ZiG starts to be functional and we agree on the functionality of ZiG, it is real, it is tangible, and it starts to be seen as success, we likely to see confidence rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
So they say success breeds success. It is important that we see ZiG starting to be successively functional. And as it is currently, there is every reason to believe in ZiG. There is every reason to hope in ZiG, in that even the monetary policy itself is sound enough to support the functionality of the currency.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 90 million worth of ZiG against foreign reserves of $285 million. This only tells you that ZiG is fully backed by foreign reserves in form of cash and precious minerals, 800 million and 185 million respectively. As such, it is going to be convertible, more convertible, meaning that you can, those that have got import requirements can easily walk into a bank and get their invoices paid by the bank with ease. This is an improvement from the past, and we see that as supporting confidence. But also in the local economy, we see a situation of increased usage of ZiG. I've just given you the monetary aggregates. And these monetary aggregates support that with the sufficient demand for the ZiG, which is the situation that has been created through initially corporate taxes that are going to be paid half in ZiG, that is the QPDs. We have created demand for ZiG.
Okay.
Creating demand in the sense that normally these corporate taxes, QPDs, are at around, on average, 300 million, and half of that is about 150 million, meaning that there will be demand for about 150 million worth of ZIG against 90 million. Meaning, this only tells you that there will be increased use of ZIG in the economy as you try to accumulate ZIG for payment of statutory obligations.
Okay, so now, according to government, Zimbabwe's inflation rate is at about, or was at about 208% as of last official count, which was in August of last year. Now, what measures can help reduce and ease inflationary pressures while creating the robust economy? Maybe you want to answer that, Tapiwa.
All right. To cap this inflation, we have already iterated in the last segment that part of it was caused by excessive printing of money. The money supply in the economy was not optimal. And we also had central bank intervention in the quasi-fiscal activities, which shouldn't be the case. And the contractors, we have a lot of projects which are going on, which are undertaken by the government. The payment is done in local currency. So that flooded the local currency on the market. But we are saying if we get to monetary policy discipline, and not only that, we need to grow our exports as well. We need an additional, to grow that additional line of US dollar income, such that it won't be too few US dollars against too much RTGS or too much ZIG in this case, right? And furthermore, my colleague here has spoken about confidence. Confidence itself, it plays a big part. Expectations themselves, what people are expecting, it plays a big part. Perhaps if the central bank becomes more and more transparent, even to the tune of hiring an independent audit firm regularly, let's say maybe after every year, to come and verify the assets that were being told about. Because yes, now we have seen, but in the future, we need to see that ongoing exercise, the exercise of transparency, as well as growing our exports and other things.
Okay, now, Mr. Gwanyanya, closely linked to this, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has adopted a market-determined system for setting exchange rates. Now, with the auction system being replaced by a refined interbank foreign exchange market, which connects and allows trading between willing buyers and willing sellers. What does this imply now?
So the market-based or determined exchange rate is a competitive exchange rate mechanism where banks are having now to compete in terms of the exchange rate and customers. But this has been made possible by the monetary policy itself, which has stabilized the currency and which has addressed permanently the question of convertibility. Now, exchange rate is now having to largely be determined by the prices of precious minerals, specifically gold. So banks now have within small bands to compete for a better exchange rate, so they are able to grow their customer base to push their businesses.
Okay, definitely. Now we have to take another short break in the second edition of your World of Business. We are back in the third and final edition of our show to cap off this discussion. Welcome back to the third and final edition of this week's special edition of World of Business. Now, before we took a break, Gentlemen, we highlighted of the promising economic stability and these new measures which we will see. Now, as we continue, we need to tackle more issues that are of importance. As we have seen in the past, the exchange rate and inflation volatilities experienced in the economy continue to threaten the prospects of the local currency under the multi-currency system. Now, what is going to curb all this against a parallel market activity and that have threatened the exchange rate stability over a long period of time?
The parallel market existed because of a formal exchange rate market that was not functioning well, an inefficient foreign exchange market. But those issues that were affecting functionality of the formal exchange rate market have been addressed. Issues to do with the demand for the Zimbabwean dollar, for the ZiG now, and the supply of that currency. Those are the two most important variables that determine currency functionality or the efficiency of the market. And this is what the monetary policy is all about. So the monetary policy is all about trying to ensure that the supply question, the supply of the Zimbabwean, of the ZiG is dealt with. It is dealt with to the extent ZiG is only increased or allowed to grow in line with the increase in reserves. As I'm talking to you right now, the reserves are 3.5 times. They provide 3.5 times cover. So we see a situation as we go into the future and QPDs are paid, where the market is having to look for ZiG. But outside sales, you may also need to liquidate the ZiG. So as you liquidate the ZiG, banks are providing ZiG liquidity, or if they don't have, they seek that liquidity from the central bank. And as they do so, we exchange ZiG for US dollars, foreign currency. You are also building reserves.
Okay, so now,
including the reserves that are going to be accumulated from the 25%, a portion of government, surrender, export surrender, as well as from royalties.
Okay, so now many people were waiting to for the answer to this question. The ZiG has replaced the Zimbabwe dollar, which has fallen to about 33,000 to a dollar on the interbank market, as odds to times when the new currency was announced last week, traded for above 40,000 per $1 on the open market. What is now going to determine the ZiG rates and how are they calculated? Maybe you want to take a look at that.
Okay. So as we have already mentioned during the previous segment, the value of the ZiG will be anchored in the basket of the underlying assets, which is the gold, the platinum, the other precious minerals, as well as foreign currency, right, which Persistence was saying was acquired from the surrender requirements, right? So the point of departure was the price of 1 milligram of gold at that point. So it was 0.07373. Right, that was the price of 1 unit of milligram of gold. So the next thing would be to determine how many milligrams of gold or one ZiG will be in $1. So we divide that US dollar 1 divided by 0.07373. It should give us something like 13.56, right? So that's the exchange rate of 1 ZiG as to $1. Right. Then the next stage would be now to say how much of Zim dollar will be ZiG. So then we now divide that 13.56, which is equivalent to 1 unit of $1, and the other 33,000 that was equivalent to $1 prior to the introduction of the ZIG. Then we come up with an exchange rate. It must have been around 2,500 as at that point in terms of ZIG and SIM dollars.
Okay, so Mr. Gwanyanya, now, the black market, we have seen prevailing rates being pushed by people on the black market. What guarantee do we have that during this system, this new era, there won't be a black market to push the rates?
So from the calculations, it is very clear that the price of ZIG is a price that is driven from the price of gold or special minerals. So, which also speaks to the convertibility of ZIG into the US. The black market was thriving on the weaknesses or inefficiencies of the formal foreign currency market. But with this ZIG currency, we have managed to address all the underlying challenges that were driving the black market, or all the underlying challenges that were affecting the functionality of the formal foreign currency market. We don't expect, though we cannot eradicate 100% the black market, we don't expect the black market to define the foreign currency market as before. But we expect that as the currency starts to operate, we are even reducing the dollarization levels in the economy and the appetite for the US dollar in the economy, especially in the local economy.
Okay, so now that brings me to my last question, which might be closely linked to what you're talking about now. The central bank should indeed implement strict liquidity management to avoid spikes in the exchange rate. That's what you have been talking about. What are your recommendations for the bank and the citizens of Zimbabwe so that this whole change that the government is trying to put in place works? I will get responses from both of you. Maybe you want to take a look at the Tapiwa first.
Okay. So, number one, let's work and progress towards the restoration of confidence. Right. The policies themselves, the monetary policy that we are deliberating on today, the policy in itself is robust. It's excellent, according to my own assessment. But we now have to walk the talk. It's usually the problem isn't the policy, but the implementation part of it, right? I can give an example of the auction system. When it was introduced, you were supposed to get into the bank, get your forex, the bank pays for your imports, and you get your goods, you are quit, and that's it, right? But up to now, we still have allotments from last year which have not yet been paid, right? Which will be converted, there were some measures to address that in that monetary policy. Because of our time, I won't get into that. But I'm saying the policy in itself is okay, but let it be implemented in a manner that's strict and tight as how good it is on paper.
So you are talking about implementation.
Implementation,
okay.
Right.
And you, sir, what do you have to say on this?
Yeah, definitely implementation is a key factor, but we see a measure of commitment from the governor and even the Monetary Policy Committee and the Reserve Bank to implement the monetary policy statement or the monetary policy. But there are also measures that have been taken, especially on the demand and supply of the ZIG and on the reserves themselves. The central bank has already engaged external auditor, I think top 5 external auditor, to be auditing the reserves. So this gives a measure of confidence to the ordinary person, but not only confidence, but it also ensures that we are working within the parameters as regards monetary aggregates.
Okay, so it seems I think our time is running out a little bit. But gentlemen, thank you so much for gracing our show. That is the world of business, and we hope that the public have had an insight. They now understand more the monetary policy statement. We hope that we are going to have you again back on our show. We have come to the end of this week's special edition of World of Business, where we were unpacking the monetary policy statement, which was presented by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor, Dr. John Mushayavanhu, last week. And a new structured currency was introduced. Well, we sincerely hope for the best as we tackle this new era. We wish you a pleasant viewing.